Hello, I'm Hope Logan. I am an actor on Bold and the Beautiful, and many people really love both me and our Bold and the Beautiful drama. So I've come here to share updates about my beloved Bold and the Beautiful. Everyone, please subscribe and support me. If you do, I will keep coming every day with new updates for you. Monday arrived like the opening chapter of a storm that had been building quietly behind the polished walls of Forrester Creations for far too long. Inside that glamorous fashion empire, the tension between loyalty, ambition, and family resentment was becoming impossible to ignore. And at the center of it all stood Hope Logan, visibly shaken beneath the weight of uncertainty. Liam Spencer watched her carefully, seeing the hesitation she tried so hard to hide, and for once his concern felt deeper than jealousy or rivalry. He truly believed Hope had spent years trapped beneath Steffy Forrester's control, working endlessly inside a company where she was tolerated when useful and punished the moment she became inconvenient. The problem was that Hope had never really known another world beyond Forrester Creations, and the thought of stepping into the unknown carried a fear she could barely admit out loud. Even so, Hope refused to let her dream die quietly. With determination burning beneath her frustration, she told Liam how proud she still was of Hope for the future, insisting she would fight for the line no matter what it cost. To Steffi, it looked like selfishness and entitlement all over again. Another example of Hope demanding the company bend around her desires instead of acting like part of a team. Yet from Hope's perspective, Steffi's decisions no longer felt professional at all. They felt personal, vindictive, almost cruel, as though Steffi was enjoying every opportunity to humiliate her. As the battle around Hope intensified, another dangerous fire began spreading through the Forrester family itself. Brooke Logan, driven by equal parts loyalty to her daughter and old unresolved desires of her own, made a bold and reckless move that threatened to fracture the company from the inside out. She approached Ridge Forrester with an offer that felt less like a business discussion and more like emotional manipulation wrapped in romance and nostalgia. Brooke wanted Steffi removed from power so she could take over her position. And although she claimed she did not want to damage Ridge's relationship with his daughter, her actions told an entirely different story. She pushed Ridge relentlessly, insisting Steffi should be moved elsewhere within the company, while Brooke stepped into the role where real authority lived. But everyone understood what that truly meant. If Brooke succeeded, Steffi could suddenly find herself outranked not only by Brooke, but potentially even by Carter Walton, a humiliation Hope would undoubtedly celebrate. Across town, Donna Logan nervously tried convincing Katie Logan to think about family before business, terrified of the chaos that would erupt if Katie brought Hope into the Logan company fold. None of them fully realized that the family feud already consuming the Logans was about to collide head-first with a civil war brewing inside Forrester Creations itself. By Tuesday, the atmosphere had become heavier, darker, more emotionally charged with every passing conversation. Brooke began revealing a side of herself that even Hope may not have expected to see so openly. There was a ruthless edge beneath her charm now, sharpened by desperation and fueled by her belief that she deserved more. She leaned harder into the idea of destiny, likely reminding Ridge of the legendary legacy his parents built together, and painting herself as the woman who should stand beside him, ruling the company. Brooke used every emotional weapon available to her, including the seductive chemistry that had always complicated Ridge's judgment, trying to bend him toward her will with an intensity that felt impossible to ignore. The manipulation was obvious, but it was also undeniably familiar. This was Brooke Logan at her most dangerous, passionate, persuasive, and absolutely unwilling to stop pushing until she got what she wanted. Meanwhile, when Ridge finally approached Steffi about Brooke's shocking proposal, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Steffi acknowledged that Brooke had earned respect within the company, but she drew a hard line when it came to her position. She refused to accept the idea that Brooke could simply push her aside and take over, demanding Ridge recognize how outrageous and insulting the entire proposal truly was. Later, when Ridge returned to Brooke at the Logan mansion with little progress to report, Brooke's disappointment was impossible to hide. The look on her face said everything. She was nowhere near ready to give up. Wednesday unfolded with the unmistakable feeling that alliances were shifting beneath everyone's feet. Hope and Brooke began discussing a new path forward, one far more dangerous than simple persuasion. If Ridge could not force the issue alone, then perhaps they needed someone with enough influence to tip the scales permanently. Their thoughts inevitably turned toward Eric Forrester. With Eric's shares and support, Steffi could potentially be pushed aside whether she liked it or not. The very possibility of dragging Eric into this war raised the emotional stakes dramatically, because it threatened to split the family at its very foundation. Brooke may even consider recruiting Donna to help sway Eric emotionally, though Donna's growing anxiety suggested she understood just how destructive this conflict could become. At the same time, Ridge found himself caught between impossible loyalties. Steffi's outrage planted seeds of doubt in his mind, forcing him to confront how unreasonable Brooke's demands truly sounded when spoken aloud. Deep down, Steffi knew the real source of all this chaos was Hope and the battle surrounding her fashion line. Ridge might even begin wondering whether things would have spiraled this far if Steffi had handled Hope differently from the beginning. One dismissive laugh, one moment of public humiliation, may have ignited a war now threatening to consume everyone involved. By Thursday, the conflict had spread so far that even Bill Spencer and Katie Logan found themselves genuinely concerned about Brooke's growing power grab. The situation was no longer just emotional drama between family members. It was beginning to threaten the future of the company itself. They worried Brooke might actually succeed in convincing Ridge to sideline Steffi, which would almost certainly keep Hope at Forrester instead of bringing her over to Logan, where they wanted her. But while executive power struggles dominated one side of the company, another dangerous storyline quietly crept through the shadows. Dylan received a formal job offer at Forrester Creations to work alongside Daphne Rose on the fragrance line as her assistant, and the opportunity filled her with excitement and hope for a fresh beginning. Yet lurking nearby was Remy Price, silently watching through an office doorway with growing shock and anger as Dylan and Electra Forrester happily reunited like close friends again. The sight clearly rattled him because it threatened the leverage he still held over Dylan. In that instant, the danger surrounding Remy intensified once more. It became painfully obvious he would likely use Dylan's renewed connection with Electra as another weapon, pressuring her to approach Deacon Sharp on his behalf or risk losing everything she had rebuilt. The happiness Dylan briefly experienced suddenly felt fragile, hanging by a thread ready to snap at any moment. Then Friday arrived, carrying the full emotional weight of everything that had been building all week long. Brooke stood firm in her belief that she was the right choice to stand beside Ridge, while Steffi represented the wrong direction for the company. Yet beneath Brooke's confidence lingered something unsettling. The entire situation began resembling an eerie repeat of past betrayals and corporate coups, only this time the roles had shifted. Instead of Brooke manipulating Carter for power, it now appeared Hope was influencing Brooke, quietly steering her mother toward a battle fueled by resentment and personal revenge. There was also the growing possibility that Steffi would finally recognize Hope's involvement behind the scenes and retaliate by firing her outright, a move that would only push Brooke even further into open warfare. At the same time, frustration boiled over elsewhere inside Forrester Creations as Zende Forrester reached his breaking point. For weeks, he had tried to remain patient and professional while Eric's couture line dominated attention, but the disappointment he carried could no longer stay hidden. In a burst of anger and heartbreak, Zende confronted Carter, revealing that he had designed an entire collection that might never even see the light of day. The pain in that confession ran deeper than professional frustration. It was the crushing feeling of being unseen, undervalued, and discarded inside a company built on family legacy and artistic passion. Whether Carter would reassure him or quietly blame Steffi for the situation remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: resentment was spreading through every corner of the company. As the week of May 18th through the 22nd began, the atmosphere inside Forrester Creations became almost unbearably tense, especially with the final days of May sweeps approaching fast. Every relationship felt strained, every conversation loaded with hidden agendas and emotional landmines waiting to explode. Zende stood dangerously close to an emotional collapse, and there was growing speculation that Hope might try recruiting him to support Brooke's takeover ambitions. If Zende spoke to Ridge about replacing Steffy with Brooke, it could give Hope exactly the momentum she needed to continue her quiet campaign behind Steffy's back. Elsewhere, Dylan tried embracing excitement over her new position working with Daphne on the fragrance line, but Remy's looming threats cast a dark shadow over her future. Sooner or later, she might be forced to approach Deacon Sharp on Remy's behalf, despite knowing how suspicious and dangerous it would look, especially since she desperately needed to hide the truth about her connection to Remy. Bill and Katie also considered sweetening their offer to lure Hope away from Forrester entirely, though Katie herself remained conflicted. Brooke's recent cruelty toward her left emotional scars, making it difficult to decide whether to support her sister or condemn her reckless pursuit of Steffy's power. And in the middle of all this chaos stood Eric Forrester, perhaps facing the most painful position of anyone involved. Brooke and Hope might pressure him to take sides in a battle that threatened to tear apart the family he spent his entire life building. Ridge likely wanted to avoid putting his father in that impossible position, but avoiding it seemed increasingly unrealistic as tensions escalated day by day. Meanwhile, other lives continued moving beneath the surface of the larger war. Updates loomed regarding Daphne and Carter's plans for starting a family, while questions remained about what the future held for Taylor Hayes and Deacon Sharp. Donna, sensing the emotional disaster approaching from every direction, grew increasingly overwhelmed with anxiety about what lay ahead. And above all else, the feud between Steffy and Hope had returned stronger, uglier, and more personal than ever before. What began as professional disagreements had evolved into a bitter emotional war fueled by pride, insecurity, jealousy, ambition, and years of unresolved wounds. By the time the dust finally settled, it seemed inevitable that someone's career, someone's family, and perhaps even someone's heart would be left shattered beyond repair. The deeper the battle inside Forrester Creations spiraled, the more the company itself began to feel less like a world-famous fashion house and more like a battlefield disguised beneath couture fabrics and polished smiles. Every hallway conversation carried hidden meaning, every glance across the office seemed loaded with suspicion, and every alliance suddenly felt temporary. Hope Logan could sense it all around her. Yet instead of retreating, she became more determined than ever to fight for what she believed belonged to her. The pressure weighing on her shoulders was enormous, because this was no longer just about hope for the future. It had transformed into something far more personal, a desperate fight for respect, identity, and survival inside a company where she increasingly felt unwanted. Liam Spencer watched this transformation with growing concern, seeing how emotionally exhausted Hope had become, even as she tried to project confidence. Part of him feared she was walking into a war she could never truly win, especially against Steffy Forrester, whose grip on power seemed almost impossible to break. But another part of Liam understood exactly why Hope refused to surrender. After dedicating so many years of her life to Forrester Creations, walking away now would feel like admitting defeat, not only professionally, but emotionally as well. Meanwhile, Brooke Logan's campaign against Steffy continued escalating behind closed doors, with an intensity that shocked even those closest to her. Brooke had convinced herself that she was acting out of love for Hope, but beneath that justification lingered something much more dangerous: her own hunger for control and significance. Every conversation she had with Ridge became layered with emotional manipulation, romantic nostalgia, and subtle guilt. She reminded him of their history together, of the empire they once dreamed of building side by side, carefully painting an image where she belonged beside him at the top, while Steffy represented division and conflict. Ridge found himself increasingly trapped between two worlds he could not reconcile. On one side stood Brooke, the woman who always knew exactly how to reach his emotions and make him question everything. On the other stood Steffy, his daughter, whose fierce loyalty to the company and determination to protect her position mirrored so much of himself. The strain was beginning to show across Ridge's face, in the heaviness of his voice, and in the growing silence that followed every conversation about the future of the company. Steffy, however, refused to back down quietly. The more she sensed Brooke and Hope maneuvering behind the scenes, the colder and more defensive she became. To her, this was not simply about business politics or executive titles. This was an attack on her authority, her family legacy, and everything she had worked to protect. She believed Hope's inability to accept rejection had pushed Brooke into launching this reckless power play, and the realization only hardened her resentment further. At times, Steffi's anger threatened to overwhelm her judgment completely. She replayed every interaction with Hope in her mind, questioning whether she had underestimated just how far Hope would go to reclaim power inside the company. Yet beneath Steffi's fury was also a growing unease she could not fully ignore. If Brooke truly succeeded in swaying Eric and Ridge, Steffy could suddenly find herself isolated in the very company she had fought so hard to lead. The thought haunted her more than she wanted anyone to know. Elsewhere, the emotional fractures spreading across the Forrester family began affecting employees who had nothing to do with the central feud. Zende Forrester's frustration intensified with each passing day as he watched his creative work continue gathering dust while attention remained focused elsewhere. For an artist whose identity was deeply tied to his designs, the rejection cut painfully deep. He poured his heart into an entire collection, only to feel invisible inside the company that was supposed to nurture his talent. His confrontation with Carter Walton had not fully relieved the bitterness building inside him. If anything, it only exposed how deeply neglected he truly felt. Carter understood Zende's anger, but he also knew the company was becoming dangerously unstable, with leadership tensions threatening every department and every employee beneath them. The uncertainty spreading through Forrester Creations created an atmosphere where nobody felt secure anymore, and that fear slowly poisoned morale from the inside out. At the same time, another dangerous thread quietly tightened around Dylan's life. Her excitement about joining Daphne Rose on the fragrance line should have marked the beginning of a hopeful new chapter, but Remy Price's presence turned that hope into constant anxiety. The moment he saw Dylan reconnecting happily with Electra Forrester, his expression darkened with calculation. He immediately recognized the emotional leverage he still possessed and prepared to use it without mercy. Dylan now faced an impossible situation where every step forward risked dragging her deeper into Remy's manipulation. The thought of approaching Deacon Sharp on Remy's behalf filled her with dread, because she understood how suspicious it would appear if anyone uncovered the truth about their connection. Yet fear remained Remy's strongest weapon, and Dylan could already feel herself becoming trapped inside a web she desperately wanted to escape. Even her moments of happiness with Electra now carried shadows lurking just beneath the surface, threatening to destroy the fragile trust and friendship they had rebuilt. Back at the Logan mansion, Katie Logan found herself emotionally torn as Brooke's obsession with taking Steffi's position intensified. Watching her sister pursue power so aggressively stirred complicated feelings Katie could no longer ignore. Brooke's recent behavior toward her had been harsh and dismissive, leaving wounds that still had not healed. Yet Katie also understood the fierce loyalty Brooke carried toward Hope. Bill Spencer, meanwhile, viewed the entire situation with increasing skepticism. He recognized the chaos erupting inside Forrester Creations and saw opportunity hidden within it. If Hope became too alienated from the company, perhaps she could finally be persuaded to join Logan instead, allowing them to strengthen their own future while escaping the toxic war consuming Forrester. But even Bill understood that emotions were driving these battles far more than logic. Pride, resentment, history, and unresolved family pain had all become tangled together so tightly that separating business from personal revenge no longer seemed possible. And looming over everyone was Eric Forrester, quietly carrying the unbearable weight of knowing his next decision could permanently divide the family he loved. Brooke and Hope saw him as the key to shifting power inside the company, while Steffi desperately hoped he would defend the family legacy she believed she was protecting. Ridge hated the idea of forcing his father into such a painful position, but the conflict had already grown beyond anyone's control. Eric could feel the pressure mounting from every direction, and with each passing day, the atmosphere around him grew heavier. He had spent his entire life building Forrester Creations into something legendary, yet now he stood watching personal grudges threaten to destroy everything from within. The heartbreak of that realization lingered quietly behind his eyes whenever family members gathered together, pretending everything was still normal. But nothing was normal anymore. As May sweeps neared their explosive conclusion, the emotional lines between ally and enemy became more blurred than ever. Hope and Steffi's feud reached terrifying new levels, no longer fueled solely by professional rivalry, but by years of bitterness, jealousy, insecurity, and emotional scars neither woman had ever fully healed from. Brooke's ambition continued pushing Ridge further into emotional conflict, while Liam worried Hope was losing herself inside a battle built on anger instead of hope. Zende stood ready to explode under the weight of neglect. Dylan struggled beneath Remy's dangerous control, and Katie questioned whether family loyalty was worth the destruction unfolding all around them. Every character seemed trapped inside a storm they helped create, yet no longer knew how to stop. And as the final days approached, one truth became impossible to ignore. When power, love, family, and revenge collide inside the world of Forrester Creations, nobody escapes untouched.